Thanks for joining us today. We have an incredible guest. I've been waiting to talk to him my whole life. Hope you guys will enjoy this. This is Craig Beardsley. If you're not familiar with him, you should be. If you're in the swimming world, he's a former world record holder in the 200 butterfly. He's done just incredible things beyond that. I hate to pin that one of many things to you, but he swam for University of Florida. He originally comes from New Jersey, and we're going to find out about his program, Swim Across America, today. And there's way too many questions to ask to ask you, Craig, to really get started. But please tell us a little bit about, if you wouldn't mind, and welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in swimming, so we can just get a beginning of the roots here.
Sure. Well, John, thank you very much for having me on. Thank you, Fluid Mechanics, and I've seen the other incredible speakers you've had. So it's an honor for me to be on.
We're all in great company here.
Yeah, no, this is good. So I grew up in New York City, in Manhattan, in the Upper West Side, where there was no swimming, and I learned how to swim at the 92nd Street Y when I was a kid, just for safety. That was it. And then we moved to a little town when I was 10, to the countryside of New Jersey in Bergen County called Harrington Park. And I was still attending school. I went to the United Nations school as a kid. And I didn't know anybody in Harrington Park because I wasn't going to school there. And so we joined the local Harrington Park summer club. And we lived right down the road from it. And I joined the swim team, really not because I wanted to swim, but it was really just to make friends my age. I didn't know anybody. Right. And surprisingly, my mom couldn't swim. I mean, she maybe can make 25 meters.
So you're the first in your family to be swimming and racing?
My immediate family. My dad could swim and he didn't. But actually, my great-grandfather, my mom's Chinese, but my father's side is all Danish. My grandmother is Danish. So my Danish great-grandfather was a seafaring captain, Captain Otto von Dahn. And he actually received the Danish Medal of Honor because his boat was sunk by a torpedo in the war. And he carried 2 men on his back for 8 hours in the sea, in the North Sea, and saved them. So there are swimming.
Well, that's two members in the family that I know have a Medal of Honor. For different reasons, but
yeah. So, but yeah, he was big. He was 6'8" and a big Dane, and so that's probably where my swimming genes come from. But I started swimming just to make friends, John, and summer club is like the best place to start. Right? We had fun. My first coach was a gentleman named Tom Stanley. He was an ex-Marine, and he was such a lovely man. And, he loved swimming, and, he would have us do 25s while he'd do his, 200 push-ups on the side of the deck. And,
right.
And he was the one that actually taught me how to swim butterfly. And the way he did it was and you can't do this today, but he tied rope around my ankles. Mm-hmm. And he said, just move your hips and move your legs together and get to the other side without drowning.
We used to have those mini tires for us, and they did that.
Yes, yeah. It was just rope for us. We had a small budget. So but that's actually how I learned how to swim butterfly, with rope tied around my
I'm going to guess he had no idea what he was starting.
No. But you know what? But I picked up on his love of the sport and the passion, and that's what kept me going. And of course, as you remember as a swimmer, we'd go to county meets at the end of the summer. And still to this day, the trophies that I won at counties are the biggest ones
right.
that I have in my life. I mean, they're huge. So, but because of that, there were a couple of kids who swam winter on my summer club, and I was having success early on. And they talked me into, joining a winter team. And that's kind of how it all started.
Got it. Do you remember some kids would go up and they'd look at the trophies, right? And they'd all surround the trophies on which ones they wanted to win.
Yes, absolutely. They're all laid out there, right?
It's such a big deal at that age too, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's weird that later in life, some of the trophies that you win, you've won some amazing trophies, actually still mean a lot, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And it's because of what they represent, right? It's the memories and the good times and the rivalries that you have as a kid
Right.
and it just, it's kind of the genesis of what was to come later, great
Right.
memory.
Let me just ask you another question. In your opinion, what skills are important as you're younger to develop to become a successful swimmer?
Um, I think when you're really young, you just need to have fun. I didn't, when I was young, I just had fun, right? I was at the Harrington Park summer pool like every day, all day long, just playing, running around, and swim team practice, and then at the pool all afternoon. And and I didn't start seriously swimming winters until I was 12. And so and there's no right or wrong age to start. Everybody starts when they start, right? But
Right.
and there's success stories from every age. But I think when you're really young, you just need to just have fun, learn to appreciate and respect the water, right? And realize, the water is your friend and not be scared of it, but respect, have an utmost respect for it. But when you get a little older and you start swimming, I really think fundamentals are the most important thing. You can't tell what type of swimmer you're going to be when you're 10 or 9 or 12, right? Because your body's going to change and you're going to grow and your strokes are going to change, right? You might be a backstroker, it might turn into a freestyler later or something else. So I think fundamentals are the most important thing, and learning how to swim all 4 strokes, is just a really important foundation for being more successful later.
And I think even to add to that, I think it almost doesn't, at that age, doesn't really matter that you're going to be great someday or not. You're going to have such a great experience, right? I think you and I have had lifelong experiences with swimming, and I'm now 58 while we're doing this show here, and I think it's just a lifelong, and you join a community of people that are really going towards and trying to develop and things like this. And I think if it's healthy, it's really important for parents that might be watching this show to know if it's a healthy experience. If your swimmer is the slowest one on the team, that's fine. They're part of that community. They're needed.
Right. And also, even beyond that, I think when you're young, I think it's really important to play and experience other sports as well besides swimming. Don't call yourself a one sport athlete when you're, in single digits in age, right? Because honestly, how do you know what you're going to be good at unless you try everything? So like when I was young, and I was like a chubby fat kid, and I played football, right? And I think back then in Pee Wee football, if you weighed over 100 pounds, they moved you up to the big group.
Okay.
But like I got moved up to the big group and I got clobbered, right? But I liked it, I liked it. And then I played basketball and I was terrible at it. I tried baseball, I was terrible at it. Did some, but I did all these different sports and I also swam, and I knew that I was just very comfortable swimming for many reasons, right? Not just the physical part, but also the mental part. And I enjoyed everything about it. And I had success in it early on, which also kind of built upon itself. But I think the only way that you know that you like swimming really is to try to do other sports as well, right? And those other sports actually, they all complement each other, right? I mean, and you see this, as you progress down the, further into the sport, right? Like you can learn from other sports, and those sports, take away from swimming as well.
Right.
So,
I grew up in a swimming village, a fishing village, and a lot of my understanding of my strokes came from rowing.
Yeah.
And so when you're rowing, right, it's a lot like a breaststroke motion. And I was a good rower because I was a lobsterman when I was a kid. So it taught me a lot. That's right. And so activities, all kinds of different activities lean in and right and help you understand your swimming more.
Yeah, I think it's important. And then you also learn, what it's like to, the process of learning everything, whether it's basketball or baseball. It's, again, you're not going to get up there and swing a bat or right away without learning the proper technique, right? Or unless you're one of those supernaturally gifted athletes that just
comes right away.
Right, will come there. I mean, and those are very few and far between. But I think once you develop the understanding of how to learn a sport, that can translate to other sports as well.
And then you kind of find your niche, right, as you go.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, so here you've and we're going to go farther into this if we can, but so here you've been from a beginning athlete all the way to the top of the world, where you've beaten everyone in the world. So when you're going through that in the beginning of your swimming career, just when you started, basically, did you know did that come natural to you? Was that just or did that take development?
I think that is developed along the way, right? And I grew up, and I'm sure you've heard this many times because this is not unusual, but for me, it wasn't about winning. It was more about, I don't want to lose. I didn't want to lose. I didn't want to embarrass myself or embarrass my parents or my coach or anybody. And that's what drove me. It wasn't about winning. It was just, I didn't want to lose.
Interesting. I hear it once in a while, but to tell you the truth, that I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah,
especially with what you did.
but that's a powerful driving force,
It
motivated me. And you were sharing a story earlier with me about junior nationals, right?
Yes.
And I had a very similar story to that really actually motivated me for many years to come. My first winter full program was the Ridgewood YMCA, and my coach was Frank McElroy. He was my second. I had 3 coaches my whole life. He was my second coach. Took me all the way from 12 years old till I went to college. And I had a lot of success early on, and I actually made Y Nationals as a 12-year-old in the 200 free.
Wow. Very young.
Of course, Y Nationals are in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm like, yeah,
right, you gotta
go. And even as a 12-year-old, I knew that was going to be great. And Frank told me I couldn't go because their team, the Ridgewood Y men's team, was really good this year. I mean, and for me to go and have my parents go down for one event, which I was probably going to get last in, was just a waste of time and waste of money. So I didn't get to go. And the Ridgewood Y men's team won Y Nationals that year, and I missed it.
Oh.
And I vowed to myself, I remember this saying, you know what, I'm never going to let that happen to me again, where I'm that close, where someone else is going to decide what I can and can't do. And that was a huge motivator for me for many years to come. When I made my first senior nationals, I was 15, and it was at Canton, Ohio.
Okay.
And I went there, and we had one other girl on our team, so 2 of us went with Frank. And what happened was I bombed. And the reason I bombed, it was because I got there, and I remember I jumped in the pool, and I got out, and I ran up to Frank, and I go, you won't believe, that I was in the same lane as John Neighbor and Brian Goodell. Right. And I saw this person, and I stunk up the pool. And Frank told me afterwards, he said, Craig, you're here to race, and you're not here to get autographs.
Right. You're not watching the race. You're a part of it.
Right. You're a part of it. You earned your spot to get here. But I was starstruck. I was in awe, and I stunk up the pool. You
and I had some of the same talks. Councilman talking to me, he said the same type of thing. You've earned your spot to be here. Everybody here can beat you, and you can beat everybody else.
Yeah. And you have to, but that you have to practice to get to that part in your head, right? When you get on the block where you've done the work, you've done everything possible, so you have no doubt in your head. you don't have to tell people that, but you just have to know it.
Right. Wow. Yeah. And I'll never forget when I saw you first swimming, I was amazed because your stroke was so unique compared to any stroke I'd seen. You had really kind of flattened your stroke out. It was a little more front loaded than I was expecting. And boy, can you move though.
Oh, thank you.
My butterflyer that was or what I call my butterfly, but the butterfly that was on my relay was Jim Halliburton. Do you remember him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Jim is
Wonderful person. Yeah. And so I'm gonna guess I think he was a little older than me, so you guys are pretty close, I think, age wise.
We crossed over a bit, and and I was, when you're young and you're very aware of who all your competitors are. Right. I mean, there were a few like that I grew up with as age groupers. It was Dennis Baker, John O'Shaughnessy, Ed Ryder, Bill O'Brien. We were all flyers from around the country. We all watched each other, every race that we did, and it was great. I mean, it was great.
Right.
It was great.
Amazing. So, what took you from, swimming? Obviously, you're very, very good, and then you went and swam in University of Florida, and if I'm right, with Randy Reese, and that's Eddie's brother. Is that correct? Two amazing individuals. Tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just start by saying, I only looked at 3 colleges. I looked at University of Texas because Eddie just left Auburn to start up the program at Texas. Okay. I looked at Florida, and I actually looked at Indiana.
So you and I would have been teammates. I would have loved it.
It would have been really cool. And I went to Indiana in the fall of my senior year. I'm young. I'm young for my grade. I was only 16, and Doc was amazing. I mean, you're talking about strokes. Doc did his, took out his little bowl and did his wind up beaver and his frog and show me, the wake they would leave. And I was like, whoa! I was like way out there. And I went to dinner with Marge at their home.
Oh, was she wonderful?
Yeah, that was wonderful. But what happened was the weekend I was on my recruiting trip there, there was a huge coal strike, and everything shut down like at 5 p.m. I mean, everything was blacked out. The dorm rooms, there was no electricity.
Wow.
So I'm like, well, I'm
not doing that.
But I'm not going to Indiana. But yeah, so I ended up going to Florida. It was a real toss-up between the two. I was, in awe of both of Eddie and Randy. I'll tell you one of the things I learned actually, and I was very aware of this in high school, and this was a big deciding factor of choosing, say, Florida, Randy over Eddie, was because I had a lot of success in high school. And, Frank McElroy was my coach. And when you have success as an athlete, it changes your relationship with your coach from both sides, right? And, Frank now has a swimmer who's world ranked and going to nationals. I'm having this success. And we started, without realizing it, taking advantage of our relationships, a little more leniency. I'd screw around a lot more. And Frank would kick me out, and I'd get out. Then he'd say, "No, get back in the pool. You're not leaving, right?" And so my senior year, I was really looking forward to just getting out of Jersey and moving on to the next stage of my swimming life. But I realized because of what happened with Frank and I at that end that I needed a coach that was never going to happen, and I needed to have my coach who was going to be my coach, and I was going to be his swimmer and his athlete. And Eddie was always so nice.
Yes.
That always kind of scared me that maybe I'd fall back into that pattern like I had with Frank. And, I was terrified of Randy.
Yeah. I think everybody was terrified of Randy.
I mean, I'm still terrified of him. And, but,
very different personalities, the two brothers, right?
Yes. But they think a lot alike. Right. And that was the thing, and I needed a coach that I was going to be, who's going to be my coach, not my friend. Right. And I will say Frank and I are Frank's one of my dearest, closest friends now. And so is Randy. I stay in touch with both of them. So But I got to Florida, and the science of swimming was just taking off then, right? I mean, we were still grinding it out, right? Mike Bruner, when he did his 100 100s, and Mark Schubert started doing the animal lane in Mission Viejo, and everybody thought, well, Frank said, well, I didn't realize that we could do this amount of work with my swimmers, so we started doing it too. But I got to Florida, and Randy and Eddie were beginning to start looking at things differently, right? Like, I mean, we still had those huge workouts, but we also started doing a lot of quality stuff, and it's not like quality today, right? It's just it's a stage, right? And so we started looking at things very differently and started doing a lot more race-paced stuff. Actually, Eddie, Texas and Florida, back in 78, 79, those two coaches were already saying, hey, we're faster underwater. We have to figure out how we can kind of work on that. So what we did, this is 1979, we stretched out surgical tubing across the width of the pool under the backstroke flags and hung it a couple feet below. So we would swim over it and push off and kick freestyle underneath the surgical tubing. But what happened was, people were getting hung up on it, and it was delaying practice. And Randy finally said, it's wasting time. It's never going to work, right? And because, we wanted to get under that weight from the turns, but no one thought, oh, what if we kick butterfly, right? It just, we weren't there yet. So it was an evolution. But we always experiment, and that was good and bad, right? We would have a good season and we'd swim well, but Randy always thought that we could swim faster. So then he might tweak something, and that didn't always work out, or worked out for some people.
Right, they were experimenting.
Yeah, one year, Randy wanted us to use these, we called them heavy hands, and I had like 15, 20-pound weights in each hand. We'd run 2 miles around the football field, and it crushed me. I mean, it did nothing for me, but we tried all sorts of stuff, which was fun.
Yeah, I think that was what was great with Doc Councilman. We had that shirt, and it was the first swimming shirt. It says Indiana Swimming on the front, and on the back says "What's up, Doc?" Kind of like the rabbit, right? And the reason for that was every day he'd come in, he had a brand new idea that you've never heard of before, that, hey, we're going to try this. And we came in one day, you never think this, and he's got a track block, an actual track block that you start off of, and he's bolted it to the top of the block. We said, what's this, Doc? What's up? And he's right. And he says, well, if we can get this passed, we're going to, have 1 foot back and 1 foot forward. If we can get something to support your back foot. He says, but if not, it's trash and you wouldn't want to do this start, right? So anyway, now you see the blocks and they've got that back foot support. It's very interesting to watch. This guy was so far ahead of it, and I think Randy and Eddie, and they were all like really growing there.
Yeah, they weren't the only ones, but Doc kicked it off, but they embraced it, and we were looking for ways to find an edge, right, to train. And you mentioned you like to swim fast in practice, and I think that's it's something that I strongly believe in. I mean, I think people forget there's a difference between swimming fast in workout and racing, right? Yeah. People mix the two things up. Racing and swimming fast are different things. Right? How many times have you seen somebody like swim fast and miss an American record or in practice, but when it's time to race,
right? It's an emotional transition you make into almost like a different being.
Yeah. You have to learn. I mean, the way that one of I think the things that helped my swimming was I used to pretend when I was in high school and actually in college, but that every time we got to a big set, it was my Olympics. It was my national championship, and ABC was filming, and Mark Spitz was commentating or something, and I was in the spotlight, and I had to step it up and perform. And that was what was going on in my head.
Right.
And besides like singing songs and everything,
So
but
yeah, you have to visualize and put yourself in that situation, right? As
yes,
you have to have an imagination, or it's not gonna.
right. Yeah, you have to think big. You have to have a coach that's going to steer you and develop, get you into the process and winning. But it's not only the coach, right? Like I can't tell you how much I relied on my teammates always in high school and especially at Florida, right? We all had the same goal. We all had the same objective. We all pushed each other. And that was so important, because I didn't want to let my teammates down, right? And so that was something that, was really drove me to try to perform better.
Got it. For me, we ended up losing our coach when I was like 14 or 15 years old, and they left, and it was just me and the swimmers. So I was the coach at 15, and so I would swim like 500 yards and then get out and coach, which I liked more.
Yeah.
And the only reason I won the state meet that year was I worked for a stonemason named Dave McFarland, and he was the best stonemason around. And he had me doing one thing, two things: carrying cement and carrying rocks. And I'll tell you what, that got me so strong compared to and so although I didn't swim a lot, I had a lot of strength that I gained, and so I was able to win that state meet. But
right.
But I didn't have the teammates other than the young kids, and I think that would be a big deal.
Right. I don't know if you remember in the early 80s, Steve Lundquist took a season off and he worked as a lumberjack.
Oh, is that what he did? I didn't know that. I knew he did something.
And he came back and he was a beast.
Do you remember how big he was all of a sudden, right?
He was massive because he was cutting, chopping, and doing all this stuff. And we're like, whoa. And on top of that, he was mentally refreshed. Right.
It makes a huge difference.
Yes. Yeah. And I will definitely want to revisit this later on when we talk about some of my swimming stuff, because I think that's really an important part.
Absolutely. So let's go on to the next big step here, 1980 Olympics. And I know that was not an easy thing for anybody. And one of the major reasons, and I've been talking with a few people on this, and you were one of the people that got affected. And a lot of us saw it, but you lived it. And there's a possibility that this is coming around again. It may come around again in the future. And the sacrifice that you folks made, having made the Olympics and not being able to attend, I can't imagine it would ever go away from anybody that experienced that. I know it's not going away from me, and I wasn't even at that level at that time. But it's just amazing, and I think it's a possibility. I'm hearing that they're having meetings in Australia and also in New Zealand about possibly doing that for the Winter Olympics, with Beijing being the host there. And I just can't imagine what people lose in that. And Craig, you've lived that. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, John, we could, talk. I could talk all day on this, right?
Yeah.
And I think,
and your teammates can too. Just so you know, they're all.
Yeah. I think, for me, it's a little different. Like, the people that I think were really affected by it were like Tracy Calkins, Sippy Woodhead, Kim Linehan, just to name a few. There were others, right? But it's really a travesty and a shame that there are people out here who are swimming that today that don't know who Tracy Calkins is, right? Outside of Michael Phelps, she's, in my mind, the two of them are the greatest swimmers ever in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
And yes, she won gold in 84. 84 was also a boycotted Olympics, but 80 was her time, right? And she could have won 7. And besides all that, she's the nicest person in the world. But
she's such a sweetheart.
but for me, I was still kind of not at that level. I still had. So the way I looked at it was, I still had something to prove to myself, right? Regardless of what was going on in the politics and the world around me. Of course, there was no professional swimming back then. I mean, the Olympics was the only thing, right, ever that anybody, I mean, that was the only thing, outside of, usually if you're not a swimmer, nobody knew swimming in between those two,
Right.
those 4 years, right? Didn't exist. Nobody swam. So, I had to come to grips with it really early on and just say, listen, I still have something to prove to myself no matter what. I knew I'd been doing the work and and had a lot of momentum going. So I just had to tune out all the noise, right? And not think about what was going on with everything, right? Obviously, I think there are a lot of similarities in 80 to what's going on now. There's also a lot of differences, right? I mean, listen, today, no one's going, right? No one's going, right? But in 80, there was a party and half the world wasn't invited, right? And that made it kind of more difficult to know that other people were going. And it was just as difficult for the people who did go, right? Yes. I mean, I'm friends with Sergei Fosenko and I respect him and and we're buddies and, he won the gold in 80 and you know what? You never know, right? Who would have won or you're never going to know, right?
You didn't get the chance to do it. That's right.
We just didn't. And that's the unfortunate thing that, because we were amateurs, we were pawns and, you're never going to see a boycott. I mean, you might have something going on today because this is a health issue, right? But you're not going to see a boycott because there's too much money involved, right? But I think the issue that, a couple of things. One, I put into perspective really early on. I had to, right? It's like, this is just sports. It's not like I'm fighting in a war or I'm risking my life every day as a police officer or as working in the fire department, right? I mean, there are people that are risking their lives every day. This is not that, right? I think the biggest problem I think everyone in the 80 team has is that we don't really know what our identity really is and who we are. Like the IOC doesn't recognize us, the USOC does. I've had people say you're not really an Olympian because you didn't go. And
can I clear that up? You're an Olympian.
Well, thank you.
I just want to clear that up.
Thanks, Tom. But we have an identity crisis, right?
Right.
And it's not just us; it's all the other countries that didn't get to go as well, right? Or like the people that didn't get to participate in '84, right? And it's just, you talked about it earlier about the friendships that you make in the sport of swimming, and it's not just nationally; it's worldwide, right? I mean, I had the opportunity to travel the world and meet swimmers from all over every other country, and you realize at the end of the day, when you put politics and geopolitical issues aside, I mean, we're all the same, right? We all have the same desires and wants, and we're driven to do the same thing. We just live in different countries. And so, but having that opportunity as an athlete to meet other swimmers from other countries was a godsend, right? And unfortunately, a boycotting, it was just an opportunity lost beyond the scope of just individuals, but for everyone.
One thing that I noticed even today, my wife was born in China. She's Chinese. And one thing that I notice everywhere I go, when I visit her family, when I go to the Philippines, anywhere, everybody loves their children.
Yeah.
And everybody likes to eat.
Yeah.
They like to sing, right? And it's governments are one thing and people are another.
Yes. Yeah. And it's really interesting that you say that because every time, there's always a silver lining to everything. You just have to kind of look for it, right? It might not be right in your face. So, in 1980, of course, I could dwell on it and go down that rabbit hole of like, because at first maybe it was the right thing to do, but it was just, it wasn't, and it was a mistake, right? It was an absolute mistake. But in 80, if you won your event that summer, we were invited to tour China and go around the country. And, in 1980, no one went to China. It was, like going to Mars. And we went. I remember, I roomed with Rowdy, and of course, Rowdy's this tall, blonde-haired guy. Everybody was pointing at him because they'd never seen anyone like him.
Right.
But the silver lining in all of this is because I'm half Chinese. My mom's from Shanghai. And I got to, when we were in Shanghai, I got to visit and meet my relatives for the first and only time in my life.
Oh, that's wonderful.
They came out to this demonstration swim meet. We went out to dinner. I invited Rowdy. He got to meet my family. And I got to meet my cousins and some of my aunts and uncles.
That would have never happened otherwise.
It's, you know, it was because of this. So, I mean, yeah. There's always something good that could come out of something. It might not always be apparent right away, but it's there.
Just it's funny, just talking to you and a couple of things we've gone back and forth on. You seem like you find balance in life a lot, Craig.
Yeah, thank you. I think, you know, the boycott in '80 forced me to have to go that way, right?
And then once you live through that, then you can find balance anywhere.
I mean, what's the other option, right? Just to let me angry all the time. You know, honestly, like, I don't hate Jimmy Carter. People must say, you must hate Jimmy Carter. And you go, oh, no. I'm like, listen, the guy's a great humanitarian. He's done amazing things. Mm-hmm. He might not have been a great president. He might have made some bad decisions, but we all do.
Right.
And I can't hold personal grudges, you know, with people. I just have to, like you said, I have to find balance, be able to, right, and be able to move on, you know, and of course the boycott led to the next part of my swimming, going to '84.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Okay. Well, before we go to '84, real quick, would you mind? You guys got a very special honor in 1980. Unfortunately, it wasn't one that you were able to just swim for at that time. But would you mind showing because this is such a big deal. You got the Medal of Honor, and along with your teammates, all of your teammates, and I think it was the first time ever done. And you guys certainly deserved a whole lot more than that, but that is a wonderful honor. And I think that from what I heard, I was interviewing Dave Sims the other day, and he said actually the first person that had gotten that, he believes, is George Washington. Would you mind sharing that with our audience? They would love to see it.
Yeah, okay, so let me first say, before I bring it up, John asked me to take this out. I don't I don't leave this on my desk or hang around.
I thought you used to wear it like
you know, I mean, it's listen, it's cool, all right, but it's, to me, at the end of the day, you know, it's, you know, you put it into perspective, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make up.
It's not like, you know, I believe me, I don't put myself in any sort of category like everyone else who won this. It's neat, and you know, the medals and everything else. You know, like when I swam, I gave everything to my parents, right?
Because so did I. Oh my gosh,
they're the ones
like the same person.
Right. I mean, I couldn't have done it without them taking me to practice and morning workout and shuttling me around and flying me and spending money. You know, I mean, without them, would have been really difficult. So everything I ever received from my swimming, I gave it to them, and it made me happy that it made them happy.
Right.
But you know, my parents aren't around anymore, so of course I got it all back.
Right.
And it all sits in usually boxes in my basement or someplace. I don't hang anything up, but it is cool. And again, you know, we didn't even know the significance of it really until Dave Sims and Rod Nugent kind of pursued it and said, this is something really special, you know, and I'm grateful to the two of them for doing it, because it is kind of a neat thing, you know, and especially it's something that I can, you know, share with my kids. But again, you know, there's an asterisk and a footnote to all of this. So you know, I don't mind talking about it, right? And none of us, I don't think any of us really mind talking about it. It's just not an easy answer, because you always have people that say, well, you know, I could have made it, but I decided not to train for it because there was nothing there. Well, you know what? You know, you're competing against yourself. You're competing against, like, it doesn't matter whether it's the Olympics or nationals or state meet or summer league, you know?
Right.
My dad used to tell me all the time, this is one of the things that used to always take a lot of pressure off me. He used to say, Craig, just do the best that you can do. No one can ask anything more from you.
Right.
And I used to look at that as like, okay, as long as I do the best that I can do, that's the best that I can do. That's easy,
Right.
you know? So that used to take the pressure off me. And I used to always just, give it my best every single time I went out there.